People in Kigali talked about our school the way they talk about famous places. Some parents said it was the best private school in Rwanda. Others said only rich families could afford it. I just knew it was big, clean, and always very quiet in the mornings. The halls smelled like polish and books, and the classrooms had tall windows that let the sunlight fall softly on our desks. I was 9 years old then, and my name is Amara Nyankuru. Most days I felt small in that school, like my footsteps didn't make much sound. On the day of the regional spelling bee, everything felt different. Cars lined up outside the gates, shiny and expensive. Parents wore their best clothes, teachers walked fast with clipboards, and students whispered words to themselves, their lips moving like secrets. The big hall was decorated with banners and flags, and a long table stood at the front where the judges would sit. My heart beat so fast I could hear it in my ears. My stepmother, Claudine, was there early. She always arrived early when it had something to do with her son, Etienne. She stood tall, smiling loudly, telling anyone who would listen that her boy was a genius. He has private tutors, she said again and again. He was born gifted. She barely looked at me, even though I stood right beside them. I watched her fix Etienne's tie, brush dust from his shoulders, and kiss his forehead for luck. No one did that for me. I held my hands together and stayed quiet, staring at the stage, feeling nervous but ready. That school, the one everyone talked about, was about to change the way everyone saw me too. Most people at school barely noticed me. I was the kind of girl who sat at the back, kept her hands folded, and spoke only when spoken to. I didn't like drawing attention to myself because attention always felt unsafe, so I learned to be quiet. When the bell rang and other kids ran outside laughing, I usually stayed behind for a few minutes, finishing a page or closing a book slowly, like I wasn't ready to leave the world inside it. I didn't own many books. Most of the ones I read were borrowed from the library or passed to me by a kind cleaner who noticed I liked to read. Some were old, with torn pages and notes written in the margins by students who came before me. I liked those notes. They felt like voices whispering help. At home, I studied alone, usually at the small table in the corner of my room, after everyone else had gone to sleep. The house was quiet then. No praise, no clapping, just me, a pencil, and words. At school, teachers didn't expect much from me. When they asked questions, their eyes passed over my desk like I wasn't there. They called on the loud students, the confident ones, the kids whose parents came to meetings and spoke proudly about their children. I wasn't angry about it. I just got used to it. Being unseen can start to feel normal when it happens every day. At home it was the same. My father worked long hours, and when he came back, he was tired and silent. My stepmother focused all her energy on Etienne. His grades were framed. His achievements were discussed at dinner like breaking news. Mine were never mentioned. No one asked how my day went. No one asked what I was reading. After a while I stopped trying to tell them. School events came and went. Performances, ward days, parent meetings. I always looked out into the crowd and saw empty seats where my family could have been. I told myself it didn't matter, but it always hurt a little. Sometimes a lot. You can be strong and still feel lonely at the same time. That day, the day of the spelling bee, was different. For the first time my family was there. I saw my father standing beside Claudine, and Etienne between them. They were not there for me, I knew that. They were there because of him. Still, when I saw them, something inside me tightened. A small part of me hoped, even though I told myself not to. No one bet on me that day. Not the teachers. Not the parents. Not my own family. But as I stood there, holding my number card, I whispered the words to myself. The same words I had practiced alone, night after night. And even though no one believed in me, I believed in the words. And somehow that felt like enough. Everyone knew Etienne's name. Teachers said it with a smile. Parents repeated it in the hallways. Even students from other classes whispered it like it meant something special. He was known as the gifted child. People didn't ask if he was smart. They said it like a fact, the way you say the sky is blue. At home, Etienne had everything planned for him. Private tutors came 3 times a week, carrying thick books and speaking in serious voices. They sat with him for hours while I stayed in my room, listening through the wall as words were broken down and repeated until they were perfect. Claudine would bring them tea and snacks, nodding proudly as if every correct answer belonged to her too. At dinner, Etienne's achievements filled the air. He learned that word in one day, Claudine would say loudly. His tutor says he is far ahead of his age. My father would nod, tired but impressed. I would sit quietly, pushing food around my plate, feeling smaller with every sentence. No one asked what I learned. No one asked if I needed help. Claudine loved to talk about Etienne in public. At school events, she stood where everyone could hear her. My son is special, she said, laughing proudly. This spelling bee is easy for him. Other parents smiled and agreed. Some even congratulated her early, as if the trophy already belonged to her family. She accepted the praise like it was expected. Etienne didn't look proud. Most of the time he looked nervous. His shoulders were stiff, and his eyes kept searching for his mother's face, like he was afraid of disappointing her. When he misspelled a word at home, Claudine's smile disappeared. You know better, she would snap. You are gifted. Act like it. I saw how his hands shook sometimes. Being praised that much can feel like pressure instead of love. On the day of the spelling bee, Claudine was louder than ever. She told the teachers, the judges, even strangers, that Etienne would win. There is no competition, she said, waving her hand. I've invested too much for him to lose. Her words followed us into the hall, heavy and sharp. As Etienne stood near the stage, repeating words under his breath, Claudine leaned toward my father and said, Just watch. Today, everyone will see what a genius looks like. My father smiled faintly. No one looked at me. Etienne was the child everyone believed in, the one everyone bet on. And standing there in his shadow, I understood something very clearly. When the world decides who is gifted, it stops seeing everyone else. The final round came faster than I expected. One by one, students were called to the microphone. Each time the bell rang for a wrong answer, the room grew quieter. Chairs stopped moving. Even the whispers disappeared. It felt like the whole hall was holding its breath. When Etienne stepped forward, everyone leaned in. Claudine straightened her back, already smiling like she was preparing to celebrate. Etienne spelled carefully, his voice low but steady. He got the word right, and the applause was loud. Claudine clapped the hardest. I stayed still, my hands cold, my heart racing. Then it was my turn again. I could feel eyes on me now, not curious but surprised. I adjusted the microphone because it was too high for me. The judge gave me a kind look and said the word slowly. For a moment, everything around me faded. I didn't hear the crowd. I didn't see the lights. I only saw the word in my mind, written clearly, just like it had been written so many times before in my notebooks. I repeated the word, asked for the meaning, then the sentence. My voice didn't shake. Each letter came out calm and sure. When I said the last letter, there was a second of silence. Just one. And then the bell rang. The sound felt unreal. Gasps filled the room. Someone near the front covered their mouth. I looked at the judges, unsure if I was dreaming. They leaned toward each other, checked their papers, and nodded. One of them smiled at me, a real smile, not polite or forced. Correct, the judge said. Amara Nyankaru. The room changed in that moment. I could feel it. People who hadn't noticed me before were suddenly staring. Some parents whispered to each other. A teacher I barely knew blinked like she was seeing me for the first time. Then the head judge stood up and raised her hand. We have our winner. For a second I didn't understand. The words didn't make sense. Winner. Me. My ears rang and my legs felt weak. Applause broke out, uneven at first, then louder. I searched the crowd without thinking. I saw my father's face, frozen in shock. Claudine wasn't clapping. She was staring at me like something had gone terribly wrong. Etienne looked down at the floor. He didn't look angry. He looked relieved, and that surprised me. The judge called my name again and asked me to step forward. I walked slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast, everything would disappear. As I reached the front, the applause grew stronger. Not proud. Not excited. Just stunned. I held my hands together and stood there, 9 years old, in a room that never expected me to win. And in that moment I realized something powerful. Sometimes the biggest victories are the ones no one prepared for. The applause had not even finished when everything changed. I was still standing near the microphone, my hands shaking, trying to understand what had just happened, when I heard fast footsteps coming from the crowd. They were sharp and angry, cutting through the noise. Claudine pushed past people without apologizing. Her face was tight, her smile completely gone. Parents turned to look. Teachers stood up, confused. I saw her coming toward me, and something inside me dropped. I didn't know why, but fear spread through my chest before she even opened her mouth. "This is a lie," she shouted. Her voice echoed through the hall. She cheated. The room went silent so fast it hurt my ears. Every clap stopped. Every whisper died. All eyes turned to us. I stared at her, too shocked to speak. My name was still written on the board behind me as the winner. The trophy sat on the table, shining under the lights. Claudine pointed at me like I was something dirty. "She's not smart," she said loudly. "She never is. This is impossible." A teacher stepped forward and tried to calm her, but Claudine shook her off. "Don't touch me," she snapped. "I know what I'm saying. My son has tutors. My son is gifted. This girl," she looked straight at me, "must have memorized answers or stolen words." My throat closed. I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice wouldn't come out. I felt very small, standing on that stage, surrounded by adults who suddenly didn't know what to do. Then it happened. Before anyone could stop her, Claudine raised her hand and slapped me across the face. The sound was loud, too loud. It echoed through the hall like a crack. My head snapped to the side, and my cheek burned instantly. I tasted metal in my mouth. The microphone squealed as I stumbled back a step. No one screamed. No one moved. The room froze. I stood there, stunned, my eyes filling with tears I didn't want to show. My cheek felt hot and heavy. My hands shook so badly I had to press them together to keep them still. I could feel every eye on me, but no one said a word. Claudine was breathing hard. "That's what liars get," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "You embarrassed my family." I looked toward my father without thinking. He was standing but he didn't move. His face was pale, his mouth open, like he wanted to speak but didn't know how. That hurt almost as much as the slap. Etienne was crying quietly. His shoulders were shaking. He kept saying, "Mama, stop," but she didn't look at him. A teacher finally found her voice. "This is unacceptable," she said, stepping between us. Another teacher guided me gently away from Claudine, placing a hand on my back. I felt numb, like my body didn't belong to me anymore. The judges sat frozen, their papers forgotten. Parents stared in disbelief. Some looked angry. Some looked ashamed. A few looked like they wanted to help but didn't know how. I had won something important. I knew that. But standing there with a red mark on my face, I understood something else too. Sometimes when the truth surprises people, they don't clap, they strike. And in that silent hall with everyone watching, I learned how loud cruelty can be when it has nowhere to hide. As I stood there, still shaking, my cheek burning, my mind went somewhere else. Not to the hall. Not to the people staring at me. It went back to the place no one ever asked about. The place where my strength came from. The place no one knew. Before Claudine. Before Etienne. Before the quiet dinners and empty seats. There was my mother. I don't remember her voice very clearly, but I remember how she smelled, like old paper and warm tea. She was a literature professor at the university. Books were not just things she read. They were the way she breathed. Our small home was always full of them, stacked on the floor, lined along the walls, balanced on chairs. She used to say words were alive, and if you treated them with care, they would take care of you too. When she got sick, she grew quieter, but she never stopped teaching. She wrote things down instead. Notebooks filled with neat handwriting. Lists of words, their meanings, their roots. Little notes in the corner saying things like, "Say this one slowly," or "Feel how the word moves in your mouth." She recorded her voice on an old device, reading stories, spelling words, explaining why letters mattered. I didn't know then that she was leaving pieces of herself behind for me. After she died, everything changed. The house felt empty. The books were packed away. People stopped talking about her like silence could erase pain. When Claudine came into our lives, no one mentioned my mother anymore. It was like she never existed, but she did. She existed in a small box hidden under my bed. Inside were her notebooks, tied with a ribbon, her word list, the old recorder with her voice still inside it. At night when the house slept, I would take them out. I would trace her handwriting with my finger. I would listen to her voice through one earphone, whispering letters, guiding me, encouraging me. "Take your time, Amara," she would say. "Words are not a race." I learned alone, not because I wanted to, but because it was the only way. No tutors, no applause, just quiet nights and patience. I practiced spelling words in the air, on my palm, on the table. I wrote them again and again until they felt like friends. When I didn't understand something, I listened to my mother's recordings until it made sense. No one saw this part of me. Teachers didn't know. My family didn't care to ask. They saw a quiet girl and decided that was all I was. Standing in that hall, accused of cheating, I wanted to scream the truth. I wanted to tell them about the box under my bed, about the nights I studied while everyone slept, about the woman who taught me before she left this world. But I stayed silent, because everything I knew I learned in silence. And every word I spelled that day carried my mother's love inside it. They thought my knowledge came from cheating. They were wrong. It came from grief, patience, and a voice that never stopped teaching me, even after it was gone. The silence after the slap felt heavy, like the air itself was ashamed. I was still holding my cheek when I heard a calm but strong voice cut through the hall. "That is enough." It was the school director. He had been sitting quietly in the front row the entire time. He stood up slowly, but when he spoke, everyone listened. His face was serious, not angry, just firm in a way that made people stop and think. He walked toward the stage and positioned himself between me and Claudine. For the first time since everything began, I felt protected. He looked down at me gently and asked, "Are you hurt?" I nodded because I couldn't trust my voice. He turned back to Claudine and his eyes hardened. "You have made a very serious accusation," he said. "And an even more serious action." Claudine crossed her arms. "She cheated," she said again, louder this time, like volume could make it true. "There is no other explanation." The director didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply raised his hand. "This school does not work on shouting," he said. "We work on facts." He asked the judges to pause the ceremony. Then he signaled to a staff member near the door. "Please bring the recordings," he said. A low murmur spread through the room. Cameras. Security footage. I hadn't even thought about that. My heart beat fast again, but this time it was different. I wasn't afraid of the truth. We waited while the footage was prepared. Claudine kept talking, repeating herself, telling everyone about tutors and genius and money spent. No one responded. Parents who had once nodded along now avoided her eyes. Teachers stood stiff, watching quietly. The screen at the side of the hall lit up. The director asked everyone to be silent. The footage showed the stage clearly. Showed my turn. Showed my hands empty. No paper. No signals. No help. Just a small girl spelling a word, one letter at a time. The footage continued, showing the judges, the bell, the moment they announced my name. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was false. "That is enough," the director said again as the screen went dark. He turned to Claudine. "There is no evidence of cheating. There never was." The room breathed again. I heard someone whisper, "Poor child." Another parent shook their head slowly. A teacher wiped her eyes. "And now," the director continued, his voice steady but cold, "we address the violence." Claudine tried to speak, but he raised his hand. "You struck a student. On school grounds. In front of witnesses." She looked around as if searching for support but found none. "You are no longer welcome in this hall," he said. "Security will escort you out." A gasp rippled through the room. Claudine's face turned red. She protested, she argued, she blamed everyone but herself. It didn't matter. Two staff members stepped forward and guided her away. As she was led out, she looked back at me once. There was no apology in her eyes. just anger and disbelief. But she was gone. The director turned back to me and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You did nothing wrong," he said quietly. And for the first time since my mother died, an adult had stood up for me without being asked. The hall was still watching, but the fear inside me had softened. The truth had spoken. And this time someone made sure it was heard. After Claudine was taken out of the hall, everything felt quieter, but not peaceful. I stood near the stage, holding my hands together so tightly my fingers hurt. My cheek still burned, and when I touched it, it felt swollen. I kept my eyes down, trying not to cry. That was when my father finally moved. He walked toward me slowly, like each step was heavy. I had seen him walk past me like that many times before, tired, distracted, already somewhere else in his mind. But this time was different. His face looked older somehow, like something had broken inside him. "Amara," he said. Hearing my name from his mouth made my chest ache. He hadn't said it like that in a long time. Careful." He stopped in front of me and looked at my face. Really looked. His eyes went to my cheek, red and bruising. Then they dropped to my hands. They were shaking, even though I was trying to keep them still. When he noticed, his jaw tightened. I didn't know," he whispered. I wanted to tell him that wasn't true, that he could have known, that he should have known, but the words stayed inside me. He reached out, then pulled his hand back like he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch me. "I should have protected you," he said, his voice breaking. "I should have been there." The hall was still full, but it felt like it was just us. My father swallowed hard. "I thought being quiet meant you were fine," he said. "I thought you didn't need much." His eyes filled with tears, and that shocked me more than anything else that day. I had never seen my father cry. "I was wrong," he said. "I missed so much." He looked toward the empty door where Claudine had been taken out, then back at me. "I let this happen," he said. "I chose comfort over attention, silence over care." My chest hurt, but not in the same way as before. It was a slow, deep pain. The kind that comes when someone finally tells the truth, even if it's late. "I saw you standing alone all these years," he continued quietly. "I just didn't stop." He took a deep breath and finally placed his hand on my shoulder. It was warm and shaking. "I am so sorry, Amara," he said. "You deserved better from me." I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. Apologies don't erase bruises. They don't return lost years. But they matter, especially when they come with tears. As he stood there, looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time, I understood something important. Regret doesn't arrive loudly. It comes when it's too late to pretend you didn't see the damage. And in my father's eyes, I saw it clearly. Not anger, not excuses, just the heavy weight of realizing how deeply he had failed his own child. After the hall finally quieted down, the school staff moved quickly to make sure what had happened didn't just fade away. The director called a meeting with the teachers, security, and administration. They wanted an official record. They wanted the truth written down, so no one could ever say it didn't happen. I watched from the side, still holding my cheek, as the adults typed and signed papers, making sure my story was there, clear and undeniable. The director spoke to Claudine's husband and other staff. "This cannot happen again," he said firmly. "A student's safety and dignity come first." They reviewed every rule, every policy, every possible way to prevent such cruelty. I could see that they meant it. I felt small but protected, like the walls around me had grown stronger. Then came the news that made my heart beat in a different way. The school decided Claudine could no longer set foot on campus. She was banned. No meetings, no events, no hallways, not even the games or shows she loved to watch. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt relief. The person who hurt me wouldn't be near me again while I tried to learn and grow. The director smiled at me gently. "Amara, we want to make sure your talent is recognized. We are offering you a full scholarship for next year. You deserve to be here without fear, without doubt." I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. My fingers tightened around the edge of my dress. 4 years I had studied alone, unnoticed, and now someone was saying they believed in me fully. And there was more. Claudine would have to apologize publicly, at the next school assembly. Not a whispered apology, not a quiet word behind closed doors. Everyone who had seen what happened would hear her admit she was wrong. The thought made my stomach twist and relax at the same time. I didn't want revenge. I wanted acknowledgement, fairness, and respect, and that was exactly what was coming. As the news sank in, I realized something important. Consequences don't always need shouting or anger. They can be calm, strong, and fair. They can protect the weak and teach the powerful that cruelty has limits. I took a deep breath and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe, seen, and ready to keep learning. This time the world knew the truth. And I was ready for what came next. The next day the hall felt different. The sunlight poured in through the tall windows, warm and soft, and the air smelled faintly of polished wood and flowers from the decorations. I walked slowly toward the stage, my hands folded in front of me. The trophy sat on the table, shining like it held all the stories of the past days. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel small. When I reached the front, everyone looked at me. Some faces were surprised. Some were smiling. Some were ashamed. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Tears wouldn't change anything. I didn't boast. I didn't need to. I didn't need anyone to cheer for me to know I had earned this. I just stood there, calm and steady, letting the moment arrive without rushing it. The director handed me the trophy. It was heavy, cool in my hands, but it felt right. I lifted it slowly, not for anyone else but for myself. I looked at the crowd once, then turned my eyes toward the empty space where my mother's old books and recordings had lived. I could feel her pride there. I could feel her words inside me. I stepped back from the table and held the trophy close. I didn't need to prove anything, not to my family, not to Claudine, not even to the other students. The hall was full of applause, but I heard only the quiet voice inside me that had carried me this far. The voice that said letters and words could be stronger than fear, stronger than anger, stronger than anyone else's expectations. And then I spoke softly, only for myself to hear if I wanted, but loud enough for the room to carry it. I didn't win to prove I was better. I won because someone once taught me words were power. The words felt like wings. They lifted the weight from my chest. I held the trophy, not as a weapon, not as revenge, but as a reminder. Patience. Of love. Of quiet strength. And for the first time, I understood that winning didn't need applause. Winning was knowing you had the power all along.